everybody. How are we doing? Welcome back. We are not live, unfortunately, with a Grand Prix this weekend. So instead, we're back with This Week in Formula One, catching you up on everything that you need to know that has happened in the Formula One sphere over the last week or so. Hello, everyone, to the chat. How are we doing today? I'm in two minds. I'm quite happy that we've got, a weekend without a Grand Prix. It was starting to get a little bit hectic with Singapore and Japan back to back. But then on the other hand, I'm like, could really do with an Austin Grand Prix later on this afternoon. But we'll have to wait another week. We've got Austin, Mexico, Brazil to come. And of course, Abu Dhabi at the end of the at the end of the season is what I was going to say. What is going on this stream? What do you mean? What do you mean, Braden? I don't know. What is going on? Formula One. Formula One news. Formula One stuff. Verstappen disqualified. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Chris, you can't just come in here and talk slanderous news on Max Verstappen, who has just won a Formula One championship. And let's start there, shall we? Because it is probably the biggest news of the Formula One season so far. It's the biggest news of any Formula One season. We literally got who has won the title. Max Verstappen interviewed earlier on in the week about his emotion, that second world championship for Red Bull, and it came a little bit easier than last season's, didn't it? He kind of, hinted that last year was incredibly fun. The fact that he and Lewis Hamilton went down to the wire was incredible, but I think this year was, a little bit easier for Max Verstappen and a little bit nicer moving on to him. So, oh, sorry, your stream wasn't loading. That's okay. I was confused. But Max Verstappen, as it says, double world champion following the Dutch driver's victory at the Japanese Grand Prix. Although he didn't know, Red Bull didn't know, nobody really knew. Mainly because we were expecting half of the points because we only got half of the race. And I love how the FIA have these little wording things in the rules. Just in case they want to change something up, just in case they actually want to change the rules a little bit, they can. Because they opted to give full points for Suzuka, even though we only had 28 laps worth of racing. So there we go. We'll have to kind of wait and see. Did the penalties get confirmed? No. Nothing has been confirmed yet. Nothing has been confirmed yet. But we'll get there. Let's talk about Verstappen's positives coming out of the weekend first, because Verstappen talked through his emotion. He talked about how, Red Bull has really been his life at this point. He is very much the second coming of Sebastian Vettel at this point, isn't he? He's come into Red Bull. He is their clear talisman, a really young driver coming into Formula One. Just absolutely rocketed to the top of it. And, four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel managed to get 4 in a row. Could I see Max Verstappen getting 4 in a row, considering how dominant this season has been? Most definitely so. I think we're going to look into next season a little bit, sort of towards the end of this year. Is Charles Leclerc ready? Will Mercedes be able to come back to it? Is George Russell ready? We haven't really seen, can George Russell hold on to a lead of a Grand Prix if he's under that pressure? We haven't seen that yet. So it's definitely, as you say, Jeff, one of the easiest championships we will ever see. And that's saying something, considering we've had Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes over the last couple of years or so. But moving on with that. Ooh, we've died. Nope. Verstappen's 2022 championship, in his own words, just to give you some quotes from him. As it says, absolutely dominated. 12 races this season, one of the most dominant seasons. And he's just so good. He's just so good, isn't it? Verstappen at the moment, it does feel perfect. But it's not only because of just that we're driving with Honda and they were in Japan, but we've been really working together with them now for a few years with all the Japanese fans around as well. And I think the main thing is, did you see the Steve Bartlett interview with Christian Horner? I sat down yesterday, so I put it on, watched it. Oftentimes when I have a podcast on, I kind of have it on in the background. But no, I dedicated the time to watching the actual interview with Christian Horner. And Christian Horner talked about it in such vivid detail. And the fact that Red Bull really have been pushing for this. Red Bull were kind of willing to give up everything that they possibly could in 2021, even if it meant that they weren't going to win championships for the next few years. And I mean, it's magic that they were the last team to come into this 2022 regulation cycle to start work on their 2022 car, and they have been so good. I think we saw the fact that they were, a little bit behind the rest of the field when it came to the start of the season. We obviously had 2 out of 3 races at the beginning of the year. Max Verstappen didn't even finish. So it was definitely clear that Red Bull needed some time to adapt to these regulations, the new engine that they've obviously got in the car, Red Bull powertrains, Honda, however you want to see it. And it was really nice to see, actually, that Christian Horner talked so humbly. Actually, it was kind of a different side to Christian Horner that maybe we've seen. And maybe, that is in there. That is in there somewhere. There is a side to Christian Horner that can be humble in victory. But Max Verstappen, incredibly humble in victory. Max Verstappen, just seems like the kind of guy that just won't let it go to his head. He's going to come back in next year. He's going to be exactly the same. And he's going to try and go for another championship. And he said it's there because it's hard when you're in a lot of criticism on you. There's a lot of pressure because people are demanding a lot when you want to perform and you want to show those results. But I think they stayed calm. They knew what they had to do. And eventually, look where they are now. And I think that's a perfect way to summarize it, because Red Bull, I talked about it throughout the season, were just robotically good. Just like every single race, it felt like they got everything correct. We talked about Ferrari getting strategies wrong. We talked about Ferrari making mistakes on the driver's side of things. We talked about Ferrari getting it wrong in terms of development of the car. But Red Bull have just done it every single weekend. Every pit stop felt like it was perfect. Every strategy felt like it was perfect. Max Verstappen made very minimal mistakes. And when he did, he made up for them in emphatic fashion. You just have to look at Hungary, made the mistake, spun the car, still won the Grand Prix. He just had that air about him that he was absolutely untouchable. And as you touched on, it is a team sport. Adrian Newey with another masterclass. The fact that he is there at that Red Bull team just makes them that level above, right? He just adds that little bit extra to the team. And what can you say about Adrian Newey at this point? He's been around Formula One for long enough now that we should have expected it from him. But I don't think we expected this level of dominance. But the FIA have announced the 2021 cost cap breach, and 2 Formula One teams have been found guilty. And I feel like this is the thing that everybody has had on their tip of the tongue over the course of the weekend, over the course of the Japanese Grand Prix weekend and this week. FIA have announced there are 2 teams that have breached, clearly cheating over the cost cap. Well, let's delve into that a little bit, because according to the FIA, they're financed the cost cap proceedings on Monday after the Japanese Grand Prix. Aston Martin are in procedural breach. Red Bull committed a procedural breach and a minor financial overspend, so less than 5% of the cost cap. And the rumors going around it, it's around about $2 million, the overspend from Red Bull in the 2021 season. And of course, Williams were found earlier on in the season in May to have basically not got their paperwork in on time. They weren't timely and cooperative, but they have been able to rectify that already. So this is kind of the thing with the financial situation that Red Bull and Aston Martin find themselves in. First of all, it goes to the FIA, and the team goes to the FIA, and hopefully they can just come to an agreement between the 2 of them. That would be the best for Formula One fans and for us to sort of get this done as quickly as possible. Williams were obviously fined 25,000, as you can see there. And I feel like Red Bull and Aston Martin will probably be gearing towards trying to get themselves a fine in the same kind of way that Williams did. But I'm not sure that that really is something that should happen, right? So even Toto Wolff came out and said, okay, if Red Bull get away with this, they overspend by 2 million, they win the championship in 2021 by literally half a lap, right? So that 2 million would have made a huge difference in that title challenge. And also it would have made a huge difference coming into this season. Oh, as my camera decides to have a little meltdown, let's just sort that out before I go on another little rant, shall we? You know when you buy like an Elgato webcam because you think that'll be good quality, and then it just doesn't really deliver. Yeah, so Toto Wolff has already came out and said that if teams are going to overspend by 2 million and then all they get in return is just a fine, Mercedes are more than happy to overspend by the 7.5 million that you're allowed, or 7.25 million that you're allowed, and just take the fine. Like, they have so much money. You got to remember that Williams, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, these teams were spending like $300 million a year. The cost cap coming down to $145 million a year has basically just meant that they have had to cut down their spending. Haas, Williams, those kind of teams towards the back of the pack still aren't hitting that 145 million. So, like, the fact that, you know, these teams have such an excess in money, it was supposed to level the playing field, but it only levels the playing field if you're actually going to restrict the cost cap, right? So if Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari can still spend another 5 million than everybody else, they still are at a huge advantage. And if they just pay that extra 5 million and then they get, I don't know, a $5 million fine on top of that, they're still more than happy to gain that $5 million worth of advantage before paying the $5 million worth of fine. So it's interesting to see that Toto Wolff has come out regarding this and has just slammed it straight away. I think it's also interesting that Red Bull have already come out and pivoted and said, actually, we think that underneath the cost cap regulations, we were in the correct sort of state. We put in our money, we put in the finances, and we thought we were underneath the cost cap. And obviously, Christian Horner came out and said, you know, it's the first year that it's been done. It's the first year that we've had these FIA regulations. There's always going to be things that go backwards and forwards between the teams. But it's therefore, you know, down to Red Bull to try and actually point out where the mistakes might have been made by the FIA as they've gone through those finances. And I feel like that, therefore, it's going to go further than the FIA. So first things first, the FIA have obviously that chance to get it correct, right? They have that chance to see if the finances are actually over the cost cap. And then they have the ability to come in with the team, talk about what the restriction will be. And obviously, it's only a minor overspend, but the regulations are very broad. So they could take away drivers' points. They could take away constructors' points. They could restrict Red Bull from a session later on in the year. So maybe Red Bull miss out on a free practice session somewhere in the 2023 season. It will probably be by now. Or they take away things like wind tunnel time, testing time, or they take away the cost cap and they take even more money off of Red Bull. So instead of Red Bull getting 145 million next year, they maybe only get 140 million. They take away that advantage and a little bit more so in the next year's budget cap away from the team. They're kind of the things that the teams are already talking about, and the things that the FIA are already talking to the teams about, I would imagine. Now we have Red Bull saying, actually, we don't think we're over the limit. Was the catering really brought to them as over the limit? I think the catering thing has become a little bit blown out of the water. Like, remember, if you're spending $2 million on catering, it does mean you're also gaining $2 million somewhere else. Like, I'm not the most eloquently put together, but Taron on the pre-race podcast, if you haven't checked out the pre-race podcast, why not? Me, Taron, Chris, who was in the chat earlier, all talked about this, and we discussed the fact that, you know, yes, you can say, oh, it was just catering, but it's still 2 million in the big pot of 145 or now 147 million, right? So yes, it might have been that you spent 2 million on catering, but that also means that you overspent somewhere else by 2 million to be able to afford that $2 million worth of catering, right? Does that make sense? Like, just because lots of people are talking about it being catering, I love it. It's hilarious. But realistically, it's not to do with the catering, right? The fine should be punitive, i.e. double or triple the equivalent to the overspend. But the problem is, if you make it that way, then teams will just overspend. They literally will just overspend. They won't care. If you told Mercedes, okay, every $1 million you spend over the 145 will cost you 2 million instead of 1, they'd just pay the 2 million. They would not care. Right? Mercedes have infinite funding. Ferrari have almost infinite funding. Red Bull have almost infinite funding. Like, if you tell them that they just have to double spend these millions of dollars, then they just will. right? They'll just overspend. They'll just double up the money. They'll be like, okay, so we've got 145 million, and then for every million over, we'll spend 2 million, and we'll just do that until we reach like the actual like limit of their budget, which I think the season before the cost cap, Mercedes spent in excess of $300 million. So they're still happy to just hit up to that $300 million threshold, even if they have to double spend on the money that they've got. And that's where it gets really complicated. And that's where I think we will have Red Bull and possibly Aston Martin as well. I feel like Aston Martin are more likely to come to an agreement with the FIA. But Red Bull have come out. Here's their statement. They notice there's a minor overspend breaches. We think the cost cap submission was clearly in review of the FIA's fundings. Belief remains that relevant costs are under the 2021 cost cap amount. And I think, therefore, it's going to go further. So once the Red Bull and FIA can't come to an agreement on what the punishment will be, it goes to the next section, which goes to a Formula One financial board. They have to go through everything again. They have to get the team in. They have to get the FIA in. They have to go through every single spend that has been given by the team to the FIA. And they have to understand where that money was spent, how it was spent. Was it, Red Bull powertrains? Was it team members? Was it people outside of the team? Was it contractors that they had to bring in? They have to take into account all of those things. And therefore, it's already taken, from March to October for the FIA to go through it once. Now another financial body has to go through it all again. This could roll on for ages. I think genuinely we could get to Christmas, January, possibly even February going into the 2023 season before we have a cut fast, fully understood what's going to happen to Red Bull and possibly Aston Martin as well, if Aston Martin decide to go down the means as well. But with it being a minor overspend, I feel like Formula One have to kind of clamp down on it now. If they're serious about this cost cap and they really want to implement this cost cap, then it has to be a really hard and fast and obvious penalty that they are given. Andrew, you've gone a little bit hard in there. Strip them of all titles, simply otherwise. Personally, for me, this might be a little bit controversial. I feel like in a similar vein to Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, they've had titles in the past before that have been questionable when it's come to the team's decision. I feel like, therefore, you can't really punish Max Verstappen. As much as Max Verstappen has benefited massively, as much as Max Verstappen has won 2 titles, I just don't feel like you can take those titles away from Max Verstappen now. As much as Toto Wolff most definitely wants them taken away. But I think you can take either constructors' time away from them. I think if you took constructors' points away from them, I think if you took constructors' points away from Red Bull, it would feel much more impactful, especially as they're a team now that are trying to build themselves back up to that dominance era. Like Christian Horner talked about it before. Yes, Max Verstappen gets the driver's title, but the actual Constructors' Championship, and actually from people I've spoken to in Formula One, that's the really big one for them. So I know a lot of people, I know a couple of people that work for Mercedes at this moment in time. I won't obviously say who or where, but I've talked to them quite in depth about, the background in Mercedes and what it's like on a day-to-day basis. And effectively, the Constructors' Championship is the one that everyone really wants. As much as you want Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, whoever your main driver is for that season, at the top of the pecking order at the end of the season, you basically want that so that you can also have the Constructors' Championship. Everyone at the factory wants the Constructors' Championship, more so than I would say they want the Drivers' Championship. So I feel like that would be a heavier impact on the team to take away the Constructors' Championship. Whereas I feel like if you take the Drivers' Championship away from Max Verstappen, I feel like Max Verstappen loses out. Obviously, the kind of racing team loses out. But there's a lot of people in the background that won't really worry too much about that. And also, it just feels a little bit wrong to take it away from Max Verstappen. I think what we're going to end up seeing is probably some wind tunnel time taken off Red Bull, but they've already got the least amount of wind tunnel time because they're going to probably win the Constructors' Championship this season. Or we'll see a reduced budget cap for them in 2023, which is It's so frustrating because obviously they've had the benefit of 2021 leading them into 2022, and they've already got the best car going into the 2023 season. But I think the way that it goes, maybe they'll just take it away. Yeah, I suppose you could argue the advertising goes with the championship and all that all that merchandise that they've got as well. Example 2017 Mercedes being overfueled. Very true. Very true. Toto Wolff will always just say Mercedes would have deserved the championship. I feel like everyone at Mercedes probably already thinks that they deserve the championship, considering what happened on the last lap and considering the FIA have already come out and said Michael Massey made a mistake. Yeah, no, it's a little bit interesting. A little bit interesting. Should we move on to the next bit, though? Talking still about Red Bull, I feel like we just can't escape from Red Bull at the minute. Like, we're talking about Red Bull's championship with Max Verstappen, Red Bull breaking the cost cap. Let's talk about another Red Bull driver, or previous Red Bull driver, Pierre Gasly, moving to Alpine alongside Esteban Ocon in 2023. I put together a video on this. It's just sort of a quick thoughts and feelings on Pierre Gasly moving to Alpine. I was really, really positive. I genuinely think this is an incredible move for Pierre Gasly. Exactly what he needs at this point in his career. Because let's face it, he was really going nowhere at AlphaTauri. And AlphaTauri, as much as they've had pace in seasons gone by, I really don't think that they had the pace to show off how good a driver Pierre Gasly is. And sort of going over the comments that you guys have put in the chat from that video, I think everyone is kind of behind me. I think everyone thinks Pierre Gasly is going to outperform Esteban Ocon. But then again, I might have a slightly more biased Gasly fan base, considering, you know, I'm a Gasly fan myself, and I feel like Gasly fans might also have joined the channel because I'm a Gasly fan. But I think this is a great opportunity to really see where Pierre Gasly is. Since he was dropped from Red Bull down to Toro Rosso, I think he's going to be incredible. Oh, sorry. I think he has been incredible since that time. I think that step backwards, that kind of realization of what happened, really did change the way that he saw Formula One and really did pop off, like, how he adapted to that AlphaTauri team. I think being the number one in the AlphaTauri team definitely helped him. You know, he was able to kind of structure that team around him. Also bringing in a teammate that he was so clearly better than in Yuki Tsunoda. He almost, you know, turned into a little bit of a coach for Yuki Tsunoda at the same time, because Yuki Tsunoda needed some coaching when he came into Formula One. He's having a little bit of a better season this season. Well, started off a little bit better, but Yuki hasn't been great since the summer break. But Pierre Gasly lines up with Esteban Ocon next year. And just going over, as I said, the comments from you guys, sort of delve into a few of them. Ken thinks Gasly hasn't actually proven anything yet and had his chance at Red Bull, doesn't deserve to be at a top team again. I think, you know, there's a lot of sentiment around that. I personally feel like Gasly has shown enough in the years since leaving Red Bull that he deserves to take that little bit of a step up. I don't think, if this was Pierre Gasly going to Mercedes, I think it would be a very different prospect than Pierre Gasly going to an Alpine. Because let's face it, Alpine are still, next season, at the very best, probably going to be battling for 4th place. I'd be very, very surprised if they make the step up into 3rd place. Like, if we look at the Constructors' Championship right now, the gap between the top 3 and the rest of the field is obscene. I mean, even the gap between Red Bull and the rest of the field is obscene at this moment in time. So Pierre Gasly is going into a team that best of the best are probably going to get 4th place next season. Have I seen the video of Tomo and Ocon and Gasly explains their relationship? I have. I saw it when it came out. It's really funny that video is like 2 or 3 years old, possibly, or like a year or 2 years old, and it's popped back up again, right? Because Pierre Gasly is now moving into the team with Esteban Ocon. And it is that like perfect, you know, relationship battle and arc between the two of them. The fact that they both grew up together, the fact that they karted together, the fact they were effectively best friends until they started getting closer and closer to Formula One. The fact that they went down rival avenues, Gasly went to Red Bull, Ocon went to Mercedes, like, it's just a perfect script. I feel like if there's going to be a film about Formula One in like 10 years time, it'll probably be about Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton. But if it isn't, you know, some kind of French film, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, that battle between the two of them, you know, two kids starting out karting together. You can already see, you know, the full arc of the film coming to them being teammates, and it will either go incredibly well and they'll be really good teammates, and basically they will come forth in the Constructors' Championship, maybe get a couple of podiums or something, you know, celebrate. Possibly even one of them gets their second win in Formula One and they get to celebrate together. Or it's going to be carnage. And we have actually seen Esteban Ocon be a little bit spiky when he was in a team with Sergio Perez at Racing Point. That actually meant that Esteban Ocon eventually lost his seat at Racing Point because the team just had to deal with the fact that Perez and Ocon were arguing constantly and fighting on the track constantly, and they weren't able to work as a team together. So I feel like it's about the right time for Pierre Gasly to move on to Alpine, and I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. And kind of going from that, from the AlphaTauri thing, I think it was really interesting that Tost came out and opens up about how AlphaTauri came so close to Carlton Herta. You know, considering they literally just said, oh, okay, we've got Nick de Vries in for next season. Nick is going to replace him, Pierre Gasly. You know, we're really happy for him to come into the team. And then the team principal just comes in and he's like, yeah, but he was a second choice. He was second choice to Colton Herta. And he was so incredibly close to signing for the AlphaTauri team. They were confident that they're going to be successful with Nick de Vries and Yuki Tsunoda. But signing the American driver Colton Herta would have been an exciting prospect for the squad. And Red Bull have obviously been exploring this a little bit. We sort of heard rumors of it, and all the teams are kind of exploring IndyCar a little bit more recently. I don't know whether it is because of that American connection. You know, we've now got 3 races in America next season, and they're getting closer and closer to kind of having that American driver in the grid somewhere. Herta was supposed to be it. Now it's probably going to be Logan Sargent is the American driver to come in next season at Williams. But lots of IndyCar stars are starting to make waves in Formula One. And I feel like Formula One are kind of looking at the parallels between the two. And maybe we'll see a transition where more IndyCar stars do make that step over into Formula One, even if it is for free practice sessions, even if it is for testing. I feel like we're going to see a lot of Colton Herta, and possibly he replaces Yuki Tsunoda next season. I think if Yuki Tsunoda comes in, has a third year that still isn't quite hitting the heights that Red Bull want, and Colton Herta does manage to pick up the super license points, I feel like he's still kind of on their radar as someone that they want to get into the team. Tost even said, of course, there were some talks with Herta, but he doesn't have the super license points. When the FIA said that they will not provide him with a super license, it's clear that he could no longer be an option for AlphaTauri. So we all know that they were going in for him, but Tost has literally said, okay, this is what happened. We said to the FIA, can we have him get a super license? The FIA said no. So that is where we're at. And I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, actually. Do you think that the FIA are being a little bit silly there? Like, IndyCar is still an incredibly competitive sport, and it does have so many parallels to Formula One already. Why do these Formula One teams have to go for Formula 2 drivers? I know it's a feeder series. I know that the FIA have literally built Formula 2 and Formula 3 as this series to like progress drivers through into Formula 1. But IndyCar is so close that I feel like IndyCar should offer more super license points than it does. Because at this moment in time, we're seeing so many IndyCar drivers getting tests for Formula One teams just so Formula One teams can effectively build up their super license points. This has been sort of added to by McLaren recently. IndyCar racers Alex Palou and Pato O'Ward are set to make FP1 sessions with McLaren in Austin and Abu Dhabi. So, you know, even more IndyCar stars coming over, getting super license points, getting a test, getting a free practice session. He's lost his seat because Lance Stroll was coming in. Yeah, that's very true. It was, you know, Ocon, Lance Stroll obviously was going to take that seat. But I feel like, you know, when they were deciding between Perez and Ocon, it maybe could have been, you know, to do with the fact that they didn't get on either. Callum Marlott started IndyCar, much more challenging than Formula 2. Exactly, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know how Formula 2 isn't held in a higher regard by Formula 1. But kind of linking in to the rookie driver rule, which I've got a video coming out, I recorded this morning actually, about the rookie drivers and which rookie drivers are coming in for the last 4 races of the season, because there's actually a ton of them. So Formula One, if you don't know, introduced a rule where you have to have 2 free practice sessions a year where a rookie driver comes into the car. So McLaren, in this case, they're replacing Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris for 2 sessions over the course of the season with Alex Palou and Pato O'Ward. Fairly straightforward. Every single team has to do it with both of their drivers at some point over the course of the season. There's 22 races to do it in. A lot of teams haven't even done it once. We have 4 races left to go. It's very interesting indeed that they're leaving this rule so incredibly late. But I'm personally really looking forward to seeing these 2 IndyCar drivers coming into Formula One and seeing what they can do, because you've got to remember they have had tests. So Barcelona and Austria, we've already seen both of these drivers in the 2021 McLaren car, and they both did really well. So I'm thinking that, if they can come into a 2022 car, show what they're a little bit about, then maybe, Formula One finally starts to take IndyCar a little bit more seriously. And I feel like teams like Red Bull, like McLaren, are going to start to push the whole, we should take IndyCar more seriously. How is IndyCar not worth more super license points? And I think there will be a push by the teams, as well as some of the drivers, to say, IndyCar should be worth this amount of points instead of the basically no points that it is worth right now. You effectively have to win IndyCar 2 or 3 times before you can be a Formula One driver. It's mental. It's absolutely mental. Yeah, Abu Dhabi FP1 is going to be a rookie grid, and it's going to be so incredibly fun. I was actually thinking, and I'll get your thoughts. It kind of ruins a little bit at the end of the video. Should I get your thoughts? Yeah, why not? I'll get your thoughts on it now. I was trying to think about it, and I was personally thinking, with the fact that so many teams are leaving this rookie rule so late, would it just be if Formula One just introduced 1 race a season where every team had to put a rookie driver in? Imagine an FP1 session where it's 10 of your regular drivers, your Charles Leclerc's, your Lando Norris's, your people that we know about, and 10 rookies all at the same time. I feel like that would be really fun. Imagine the grid, 10 rookies kind of battling it out, all in the same free practice session. Obviously, it's only a free practice session, so it's not incredibly competitive. We're already seeing Formula One scrapping a free practice session for a sprint race. So clearly, even Formula One thinks the free practice sessions are a little bit dull, as much as they are necessary. Wouldn't it be really fun to have a rookie free practice session somewhere in the year? Even if it was Abu Dhabi. Just imagine every single team has to put 1 rookie in. I would absolutely love to see it. I think that would be really, really fun. But as I said, I've got a video coming out on the rookie rule. I did just want to touch on the fact that McLaren have confirmed their 2 rookies coming in, and they're both from IndyCar, which I thought was very interesting, considering what has happened with Colton Herta over the course of the year as well. Final bit of news from this week, and it's a little bit of sad news, unfortunately. W Series has curtailed their season and is focusing on 2023. So there are 3 races left to go in their campaign. And Jamie Chadwick has now been announced as the W Series 2022 champion, of course. I feel like that was, going to come anyway, but it's a shame that she doesn't get to win it actually on the track and, continue to show that dominance in the sport, considering how incredibly good she has been. But the season has been cut, and it seems to be financial. It seems like W Series just hasn't quite got the financial backing to put on the races that they had planned in America. So they had races planned in the US and in Mexico, and they will no longer be going forward. So a little bit of sad news for W Series. But if, I really want a W Series hat. And I feel like I've not been able to find one anywhere. So if anyone would like me to put some finances towards W Series in the case of around, 20 to 50 pounds, however much a W Series hat is, I'm very, very happy to do so. Also, though, on W Series, I thought it was very interesting that 4 female drivers got a Formula 3 test. That was actually last week, not this week's news, but we can add it in. I think the fact that more female drivers are getting a test in Formula 3 and the fact that W Series is maybe struggling for finances a little bit, I think we might see a couple of these female drivers with more financial backing, like a Jamie Chadwick, maybe get a seat in Formula 3. I don't know if they're going to get them into a Formula 1 car. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Jamie Chadwick probably deserves a go in a Formula One car just sometime in her career, just a test, like we've seen with McLaren doing the test with the IndyCar guys. Just give her a go, see what she can do. But like, I feel like in terms of an actual season, in terms of actual racing, Formula 3 should be the next step for her. And if she can get into Formula 3 next season, I think that will be a massive push for the sport. And it will actually help W Series out as well, because let's face it, W Series is struggling for funding because it just doesn't seem like they can really take that next step up at this moment in time. As much as the drivers are really, really good, like Jamie Chadwick wins back-to-back titles and still gets nowhere close to a Formula 3 seat. Now she's won 3 titles in a row. Someone surely takes the gamble on her. And she has even more financial backing than she had before with Jenna Racing, right? So just try and push her back up into that Formula 3. And like, even if it is just half a season in Formula 3, I think that would be massive for both Formula 3, for Jamie Chadwick, and for W Series, as they try and, you know, gain a little bit of interest in the sport and gain a little bit of backing, financial backing, for the 2023 campaign. But yeah, I thought it's a little bit of a weird one to kind of round out the news of the week with, but I thought it was interesting to kind of see what your guys' thoughts are about the fact that Jamie Chadwick does get the championship, is crowned W Series champion, but doesn't actually get to actually celebrate it in the way that she did. And Chadwick had taken 11 wins, 10 pole positions, and 18 podiums across the 3 seasons in the category. Mamma mia. Like, she's just so much better than the rest of the grid when it comes to that. And that's why I feel like she's going to be the one, right, that is going to take that step up into Formula 3 and should just be given a shot. Just give her a shot. Someone, anyone. I'd fund it if I could, but I cannot. Anyway, that is this week in Formula 1. I'd love to get your thoughts. What did you think of the show? Any good? worth it or not? And thank you guys so much for joining me. Some big news on my side of things coming very soon. I haven't actually asked if I'm allowed to talk about it yet. I'm going to be doing something in a couple of weekends' time that is absolute bucket list for me. It's Formula 1 related. It is one of the biggest things that I could possibly do, considering, you know, I'm still a smaller channel in this whole YouTube space. I love the community that we've got here, but, you know, we're not your WTF1s. So I am going to be part of something in a couple of weekends' time, and it's going to be incredible. You can have a guess at what it is in the comments down below, but I'll keep you updated, and I'll let you know as soon as I possibly can what it's going to be. As you can see from my face, I'm very excited for it. But we'll leave you there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Obviously, we'll be back next weekend without This Week in Formula 1, but with the Austin Grand Prix. So thank you all so much. Will I get a new profile picture finally? Maybe. It's just a nice picture of me in New York. I quite like it. Rocket-powered Mohawk collab. Ooh, that could be fun. That could be fun. But you'll have to wait and see. You'll have to wait and see. So I don't know if I can talk about it yet. And I will definitely give it away if I say any longer. So I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. In a couple of weeks? In a week. In a couple of weeks is when I'm doing the cool thing. I've lost it. Goodbye.